Good morning, Jan.
Michael, good morning. You're having breakfast.
Yes, indeed. Got my liquid breakfast all ready to go.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just saw
last
there
week.
was some messages in the public space.
Yeah, we have
Um,
uh, a new member of the
let's
chat.
let's see whether I can still find it. Yeah, I didn't read it yet because I was almost too late. Currently working on ensuring. Okay, but he's not joining us.
No, probably not joining us live today, but
Mhm.
good to see a new member of the community.
That's always
Mm-hmm.
good. Um, Yeah, now I was working in Visual Studio, not on a virtual machine, but wait, there's also there we can apply live share. Which one was it here? How am I gonna add? Um, yeah, it's behind all the other windows. Well, yeah, with live share I can just keep it on
Yes, indeed.
full resolution. Tells me sharing. Um, okay. Now invite, collaborate. Um, Copy the invite link. I will send that to
Yeah.
you.
And you should actually be able to just add me from your recent contacts.
Yeah, but that was in VS Code, and that was on a virtual
Oh,
machine.
okay. Yeah.
And now I'm on Visual Studio on my main machine.
Gotcha.
Unless you show up here somewhere. I don't think so. Never mind. I will
Okay.
just.
We'll do it this way.
Now, how do I get back to right here? Direct message. Yes, yes, you should have the message.
Indeed, I do. And okay, that's interesting. All right. So it brought me to Visual Studio Code in the browser now. So that's
Because I'm in Visual Studio, not in Visual Studio Code.
uh-huh.
Really? Welcome to Visual Studio Live Share. Invite, send the URL to the developer you're collaborating with, up to 5 people. Security, yeah, that's the link. No problem with you. You can share with yourself. Yeah. Once an invited guest join, you will get a notification. And
Yeah, so I should already be in there. I think it's got me as guest, opening it under a different browser tab so that I can be logged in.
the strange thing is participants 0 for the moment.
All right. Let's see. I lost all my windows. Okay, there we are. And so now I should be able to sign in using GitHub. And now it's got me signed in. And now I'm joining the collaboration session. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I could have hidden. continue as anonymous, and that would have brought me in, I think, without doing the sign in. But this way should have me on your recent contacts in that machine
Visual
as well.
Studio. Yeah, I see you here now. Okay, that should be okay. So if I switch that one off. So what I did, in fact, I brought over the information that we had in Visual Studio Code last time. So I made a DWS, so digitaal werkbon in Dutch, dws.core and a test. So in the core, I defined a model directory where I put a complete model inside, the complete model, the few things that we defined last time. Their first question. For the moment, we just have a user identity, nothing more than that. If I give the name, if I give the user a name and an address and all other mutable properties,
right?
Is it better to organize all these mutable records then inside the same user.cs, or make a separate files for all of them?
I think it would be better to organize them within the same CS file, because they are very closely related, and they're also just records. So it's really very little code to be spread across so many different files. Especially
because
all the boilerplate is taking up more space than the actual record itself.
Yeah, but it's going to be looking at the model that we have drawn last time. It's going to be an enormous model. On what we have drawn, there was no mutable pattern. There was no deletion, undeletion.
Right. Yes.
But if I define everything, it's going to be huge. So perhaps even things like delete, undelete, we should also keep it with the main record.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. So that way we don't have just a whole bunch of files, and each one just represents one little tiny aspect of the model. Instead, group things basically according to an entity.
And then the whole model. Then for the moment, okay, we have a specification here. That's the same specification as last time. The specifications, because in fact, I guess I should look at my software, and everywhere where I need a collection of things, every screen, if I want to start with my current software and I will want to build it up with historical modeling, I should just ask myself the question, which collection of records do I need here, and make a specification for it.
Yes, precisely. Yeah, that's the idea of the annotated wireframe that I go over in chapter 3, I think it is. Or no, chapter 5. Yeah.
But then the specifications from organizational point of view, would it be better to put them in a separate folder, specifications here? Oh, which is on a wrong level? No, it's correct. No, it's correct.
Yeah, it looks like it's just empty right now.
Separate folders, specifications, or do I add them also to the record from where I start?
Yeah, there are going to be conditions inside of the records.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
There's also a condition is a specification.
It is, yes. So I think that if you think about a specification that's necessary for a view, that's going to be a little bit more directed toward serving that part of the user interface versus a specification that's serving as a condition or supporting a mutable property or something like that. That kind of specification is a bit more tightly tied to the model. So yeah, it's. I think this is a matter of preference, and I would probably keep the ones that are more tightly coupled to the model within the model, and then the ones that are directed toward the view out in a separate area like this. So it could be specifications right here within DWS Core. It might be that that you end up pulling these even into DWS, which I believe is going to be your user interface. Is that right?
The core is not going to be my user interface.
Right now, I
have
think
the core here, and I have the test, and then I will probably have DWS.UI, UI.Android, UI. It depends a little bit. If we go with MAUI, it's just going to be .UI, I guess. If it is another structure, it might be a project per platform.
Yeah. So
because
given all that, yes, I expect that you would have very similar views in different platforms. So yeah, keeping specifications within Core makes a lot of sense. But then yeah, I would say those that are geared toward aggregating a bunch of information to show on a user interface, those would be in the specifications folder, and those that are more related to implementing patterns within the model, those would be in the model folder. And the line between those is kind of fuzzy.
Okay. Because actually the application on the desktop is going to be different from the applications on the mobile, but on iOS and on Android, it will be exactly the same application. The only difference is the platform. But even between the desktop and the mobile app, a lot of the logic will be the same. So that's why I think to have a single core would not be bad at all.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that that's something that you're going to be able to refine as you go. So you can start with just this this general rule, and then move things around a bit as you see where they belong.
Yeah. And for the moment, this test project can just replace the user interface to test the model. Right. What else was it? I saw that MAUI was postponed until the second quarter of 2022 release. It's not going to be in .NET 6. Would it be interesting to start with a preview of Visual Studio 2022 and the preview of MAUI? I guess it will be compatible with the NuGet packages of Jinaga.
I imagine it would be, yes. I haven't done anything in there that would be specific to any particular kind of user interface. When we do the Xamarin Forms interaction or integration, that's going to bring in the concept of notify property changed. So actually, it'll probably be an Assisticant integration, so that Assisticant can handle INPC. But then that would be, I think that's where it would start to take on some dependencies of the platform, and so the MAUI version probably wouldn't be compatible with that one, but the core Jinaga package should still be compatible.
Okay. Then I had something funny here in the unit test, that single unit test here. Actually, if I had to specify here that it had to be the Jinaga package,
Interesting.
while
Oh,
and in meanwhile, perhaps that's a problem.
yeah.
We're saying using Jinaga, because it saw Jinaga as a namespace and not as a type. And normally the Jinaga type, is it not in the unit test available?
It the type is defined just in the root Janaga namespace. So yeah, as this is written, I would expect to see the error here. Let me hover over it. Yeah, Janaga is a namespace. So I'm going to go ahead and add that and see if that at least fixes it over here. And now it still says that it is a namespace. Yeah. That is an interesting problem. Yeah. I think I might need to
get rid of
rename
it.
that.
I could just put Jinaga.Jinaga.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's not picking up the using here.
Right.
It's not getting it. Full.
Yeah. I think that there's just a. It's.
Using.
Yeah, having a class that's in the same name as the namespace is causing some confusion in there. So, yeah, I think probably the best thing to do would be to rename that class. You hardly ever see the name of that class. Yeah, this is probably one of the only scenarios in which you would. Because usually, well, I say usually, because my experience with Janaga JS is that you don't see the name of that class very often. But there may be it may be a bit more common with the types here in C# being more explicit. But at any rate, yeah, I think I'll want to rename the Janaga class. That might be Janaga instance, or in correspondence I called it community, which I thought was rather clever, but nobody understood what it meant.
Okay. Okay, then we have our tasks here, and then if I tasks for Jan, and then should, what was it? Should dot b, but then not single, but not empty, not single, but I need two of them. Is there a way to?
Yeah, I've done this in a couple of different ways. One way that you could do it is just task4Jan.length should be 2.
Yeah.
But if you want to assert based on the contents of that array, then you can use task4Jan.should.be equivalent to, and give it a collection.
Be equivalent to, and then here I can just give it.
Yeah, so it's going to use, I think it's going to use enumerable comparison, so you could just say new square bracket, and then inside of the angle bracket. Yeah, so inside of parentheses, you've got new square bracket, open, close. And then you've got your
there
curly braces, and then your instances of the facts.
Which one was that? Worker Jan. No task by dispatcher. Tasks for worker. Yeah, these two, huh? Should be that. So task by dispatcher and task by worker, like that, I think.
Yep. So you just want the closing square brace or square bracket before the curly braces.
Where do I have it here? Oh, this is an array then.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, I'm sorry. You've got you want new, and then the square brackets open and close,
Yeah.
and then you want the curly brace.
Why is it still complaining?
Yeah.
My worker. I have this one.
Would you like me to type real quick? Show you what I mean? Okay.
Yeah,
so yeah, it's going to be
these brackets I'm always happy.
Yeah. It's going to be like that.
Yeah.
So that's saying let's create a new array, but it needs to infer what type of the array it is, and then with these contents, and those are the curly braces.
I'm always mixing things up from one language to another, and never long enough in the language to know it by heart.
Yeah. Yeah, what you typed in there would be closer to JavaScript, yes.
Wait, and then I can just run with my test explorer here, and then this one, if I run it again. Okay, this one is passing.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so that not only says that you've got two things in that array, but those two things are equal to these two facts.
The exact things which I need. Then another thing I was wondering. So we have a user. That user has a public key, as an identity has his public key. Mm-hmm. Now imagine that user is created by accident by a secretary and by another secretary. Mm-hmm. So we have two users. They have a different public key, but in fact they are the same.
Right. Yeah.
And then they start assigning tasks on it. Is there a way to merge them afterwards, or we just have to rewind history? In fact, replay history.
Yeah. So the pattern that that you can use in order to do that. So I'm here inside of the user fact. I'll go ahead and add that right here. So if we've got the
user.
Yeah, if you click on share and then click on my name, that should follow and take you to in the middle.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we can have a fact called user merge, and we'll call it source and destination. And so this this fact is what you would issue in order to indicate that these two users are supposed to be the same user. Now you want a little bit more information here in order to make sure that first of all it's unique, and then secondly that you can restrict who's allowed to do this. Ideally, it's really the source that's allowed to do this. But at any rate, you've got that fact, and then whenever you want to run a query like this, then what you're looking for are not necessarily tasks assigned to a particular worker, but instead you want to bring in the merge fact as well. So so this task assignment is going to this particular worker, but if instead you use, say, from merge in facts of type user merge, and then you can say the source of this. Let's see. Yeah, the destination is the worker that we're talking about. So where that is equal to,
Because that user merge, the source, that's the user that should be deleted, and the destination is the one that we maintain.
yes. So you have to always think it through like that. So if you have a query like this, then it's always going to, and then and now here, instead of using worker there, you have to is the merge source. So you have to use the merge. So if you've got this query will only match things that actually are merged from a source to a destination. So one thing that you might do is have this specification and have the original one without the merge, and then union those two sets together. So the unfortunate thing is that union is going to appear quite frequently throughout your entire application. So I'm hopeful that that I'll be able to figure out a way to make that a little bit more automatic. But right now, that is the
make that transparent.
Mm-hmm.
That we could create a new type of user, which is actually the merge of the previous ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Then
this way we have. This way we would have to adapt all the queries.
Yeah.
All the specifications.
Yep. That is true.
We just have to be careful that nobody makes a double user.
Yeah, so there you can make the choice. You can say, well, is this too complicated? And then instead, do I force people to just replay history and say, no, that's actually the user that I want now. Cancel all the assignments to this old one and reassign to this new one. Now that becomes a manual process whenever somebody needs to correct a mistake. Yeah, it's an interesting part of modeling, is that we're modeling for the general case, and so if something can happen, then the model has to pretty much say that it always happens. So one way that you can say that here is that every time you create a user, you go ahead and also create a merge of that user back to itself. So if you always say that there is a user merge where the source and destination are the same, then you don't have to union this with a non-merged query. It'll always give you the union, but now you've got this little ugliness that's buried inside your model. Or since we already have the worker fact, there's another concept or another option we could use. Here we've got worker has user as a predecessor. So that means the user for that worker can never change, and there's always exactly one. So if instead user or worker was something that had its own separate identity independent of the user, then you could have a user-worker association that was a successor of the worker.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But then you but then you displace the problem from the user to the worker.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and just you can undo all of this stuff later. But let's suppose that we've got identifier. So some identifier that we come up with. We can work out what that is later. But then if you've got a DWS worker user, so now this is saying, and I'll do one more thing. So that's the time at which those two entities were associated. So now if you have two different users that are created, then you could at some point say, associate that new user with this worker, and now we've got two users associated with this worker. So it could, you could basically say the user's just an identity that that you could log in with, but worker is your relationship with the supplier, and so you could log in with several different identities and still be the same worker.
Yeah.
So. So yeah, that does, in one sense, just move the problem from user to worker. So now you've got a whole bunch of tasks associated with one worker, and you say, oh, it really should be that one. But then you really have So then the experience would be that you go ahead and set up this association, and then the person who logs in as a worker now sees two different worker accounts associated with them, some tasks here and some tasks there. So then it could be that the user interface merges those two workers and presents them. It presents the entire set as if they were one, and that merge can happen directly from the specification. So if we had instead tasks for user, so we've got the user coming in here, and so we first find out the worker that they are. Having a real hard time typing this morning. Well, actually, we're going to be looking at the association first. So we want these worker user records. And then from there, we can go through the task assignments for that worker.
Yeah.
So this this specification will do that merge. So you log in as a user, you see all the users or all the workers that you are, that you play that role, and then all the tasks for all those workers. So yeah, each solution has its own set of problems that go along with it. I'm afraid there is no solution that I know of that just has no problems. But yeah, you're asking to do a pretty egregious operation on the data set to just say these two identities are now the same.
Well, that was the advantage if we don't work with public keys. If, for example, we just take name, birth date, birthplace, and we define it 2 times, then we have 2 times the same record, so it's the same fact.
Yeah.
That was the original. But by using public keys, the public key is always different, so we create this problem in return of a lot of advantages.
Yeah. Yep, that is true.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much the goal. I would even say of historical modeling is to take the trade-offs that you have to make in order to design well-behaved systems and make them extremely apparent. So yeah, these are the trade-offs that you would have to make in the first anyway. So these decisions are part of the problem that you're trying to solve. But now you can't even express the solution without having made the decision and solved the problem.
Yeah. Now perhaps in a practical situation, a first protection could be if the user types in the data for a new worker, for a new user, that we search if a similar user exists already.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does exist, we present that like, oh, are you not this one?
Mm-hmm.
Are you not creating a duplicate record? Of course, if the information is not yet synchronized to the other computer, but then once he synchronizes it, there could be somewhere a notification.
Right, yes.
That something went probably wrong before we have a lot of history. And then they just have to delete that user and re-enter the information that replay it in one or the other way.
Yeah.
We have to.
I love that analysis because that's now you've got these are the things that I desire to be true, but then you're also making some assumptions when you say that hey, let's solve the problem so that we have these things that we desire. So one of the assumptions that you made there is that there is a central repository of the user information, so some place that I can search. And so, as you just said, if the information hasn't been synced to that place, then you might get a miss. Yeah. And
there's very little we can do about that.
Yeah, that's true, and that's precisely why it's one of the reasons you cannot express that kind of a search just natively within a historical model or within Janaga.net, because you would have to be able to have a fact that represents the information that you're searching on exactly. So, like you mentioned, name, date of birth, government ID number or whatever, and so if you get an exact match, then you've got the exact same fact. But if it's close, then it's still a miss, and maybe what you want is to also check to see if it's close. And then now you're making the assumption that that set of information truly is unique. But then there's a third assumption that you are you'll somehow be able to securely identify somebody with that information. So if I wanted to take over somebody else's identity. I could sign up for the system and put in their information, and it would say, hey, is this a duplicate? Is that you? I would have to have some kind of mechanism to say, yes, that is a duplicate, and let me prove it. And so that kind of gets you back to the public key. So, okay, prove it to me by sending me something that's signed by this public key, and then I'll know that you actually hold the private key as well. And then we can figure out a way to merge the history.
Yeah, you could just send that question to the other user,
Mm-hmm.
and he has to approve it with his private key, the merge.
Yep. Yep. And then there's the problem of if the merge happens and somehow even through all of these checks it ends up with the wrong merge, then you have to be able to kind of break history apart again. And so each of the solutions that have gone through here have the history still being accumulated according to two different branches. And it's only at the user interface that those branches are merged. And so that means that you could put a fact into the system that revokes that and says, nope, this merge is no longer valid. Or this user is no longer associated with that worker. And then looking for that as an existential condition, you can break the user interface apart again and see what the history actually was.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a complicated one. I like it.
You're gonna try to avoid that. Too complicated for me.
Yeah. One thing that I have that I could say about those solutions is all but one of them can be done after the fact. The only thing that you have to that you're kind of locking yourself into is if you've got the user the worker pointing to a user as a predecessor. That one locks you into the fact that that there is a distinct user for a worker, because it says so right there in the definition. But with the others, if you say that a user is just an identity and a worker is just an identity, and then there's an association, then you can bring these solutions in as as problems arise, without changing the structure of history. So sometimes you have to make a decision up front and stick with it, and sometimes you can say, well, this is good enough for now, and I'll be able to add facts later.
What you could do is put the price to create a new user high enough. Then the people will think twice before they do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing, it's probably something that you already told me. It's something that is obvious, but I was wondering about it, and I don't know what should be the solution. So imagine very easy the mutable property pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a user somewhere. We have his address. That's a separate mutable property.
Mm-hmm.
We have his name is a mutable property, and we have his first name as well. Is another mutable property. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just use it for last name, first name.
Uh-huh.
So a user with 3 mutable properties, and then I want to get that user record out
Mm-hmm.
to bind it to my user interface. So how do we do that projection?
Yeah.
Because it's a combination of multiple records.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that in a query?
All right. Let's go ahead and
And
Right,
here it's just one user, but let's say I want to have an enumerable of certain users, all with their address, their last name, their first name.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yes,
so that I
yes, I
can
love it.
just bind it to the user interface.
Yep. So let's start right here with
And then you will tell me, Jan, I told you already 10 times.
it's but this is
But I probably forgot it.
yeah, this is going to become a very core pattern within Janaga.net, but it is completely different from how any other system works. So I mean, this is perfect. That it's the sort of thing that people are going to need to be reminded of over and over again. That's fine. So we'll have the user name record. So user name. So this is for a particular user, and then here I'll have the first name and the last name.
Okay, you combine them, okay.
Yeah, rather than as separate mutables, just because they tend to change together, and it would be really weird to see, if you've changed your first name and your last name, then to come back and see just the first name changed or just the last name changed, which could happen if they're separate properties and things get synced in an order that you're not expecting. So then we've got our user address, and that one is a separate mutable because you change your address.
Add a prior there?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Exactly what I forgot to
Yeah.
to do. So that's your. Why am I writing that in C? It's a username address array. Okay. User, and so we've got our street, city, etc., etc., etc. So.
Yeah. And the prior.
All right. So same thing applies here. You very rarely move from one street address to another within the same city, so you don't want that to be a separate property. You just want the whole collection of fields to be one property. So that's kind of like the DDD value type versus values versus entities. So this is a DDD value. So at any rate, the question is, how do you create a query that gives you back all of these things, especially if you've got an array of them. So let's suppose that I have the workers for a supplier. So this would be given a supplier. I want to match all right, so first of all, I'm going to need to get to the workers for that supplier. So infects of type worker. So this is where worker dot supplier is equal to supplier.
Yeah.
And then once I've got the worker, let's make sure that we go back to the version where I've got a user rather than an identifier. So we don't have that thing anymore. So now I've got the user, and I want to pull some properties from the user. So I'm going to select an object that says the user is worker dot user, and then the name. Actually, I'll call this names because this is any property will always give you the candidates. It's always going to give you an array of results. So this is going to be facts dot, and IntelliSense isn't helping me out here. It's oh goodness, it's been a week since I've last done this. Yeah, so it is. This is where you say the names of user being a separate query. Okay, I am seeing some IntelliSense now. So all takes the start and the specification. Yeah, that's right. So from worker.user, I want names of user. So that means that I need to write that as a specification as well. So given a user match so from username in facts of type username, where user name is equal to user, and this is also where we say where not any
array username dot user is equal to user. No.
Yeah, you're right. So facts of type username again, where next dot prior contains username. So where there are not any of those, and this you will probably collapse to a condition. And in fact, this specification is one that you're going to be reusing an awful lot. So I want to find a nice, easy way to put this specification on the username record itself, but haven't come up with that mechanism yet. But you've got
something like you defined a mutable in correspondence at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so you do the same thing in facts.all worker.user addresses of user, and then write a similar query for address. And then what you'll end up with at the end here is let's see if I can get some IntelliSense on this. Yeah, it's not helping me out with the IntelliSense, but you're going to end up with a collection. Well, let's see if I can. I'll say result equals await j dot query, and then I've got the amazing supplier somewhere up here. Yep, the amazing supplier. Right, and now this results. Yeah, again, it's IntelliSense isn't helping me here inside of VS Code inside of the browser, but I've got a result as a collection. So if I do like result.first, for example, this is going to have a user. It's also going to have names, which is an array of username, and it's going to have addresses, which is an array of user address.
Yeah. Why is it still giving all these red cannot be applied to operand of the method group. So the exclamation mark.
Oh, there we go.
What did you change?
Yeah, I added the parentheses after any because any is a method.
Here the name does not exist. Addresses of user. Oh, of course, because we didn't make that one. Yeah, that was the same as the other one. But okay, so in this way we have a record here which contains all the information that we need and that we can bind directly to the user interface.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Oh, you've demonstrated that once before. Now I remember.
Yeah, and I'm sure that I'll demonstrate it many times. Not not for your sake, I'm sure, but for others. This is a pattern that it's going to take a long time for people to. First of all, for it to sink in that this is how this is done in Janaga.net. But then why? Why go through something so complicated in order to do something as simple as have a property on an entity? It seems like a step backwards, but that is the conversation that I'm going to have for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and have you tried that once performance-wise?
I haven't done a measurement of that yet on Janaga.net, but from Janaga.js, I mean it's doing the same thing, but in Janaga.js it's a very different look to it. That's the specification for for the type, in this case specification for supplier. And then collection, and you have the basically this part of the pipeline expressed as a specification function, a template function in the older language. And then within there, you've got a further specification that has a couple of properties. So it's expressed in a very different way, but it's still the same basic idea. And there I find that the performance is it's not quite as good as if you already had that information projected into the structure that you want, and that's what you pulled from the server, or that's what you saved on disk. But the difference between those two, I found to be something that your user probably wouldn't notice. So yeah, you can measure it. You can see, yep, there's a difference. There is a cost to doing it this way. But then you have to make trade-offs. You have to weigh, is that cost going to should I go ahead and optimize away the benefits that I get here about being able to detect conflicts, to merge things, to express things in one specification, and then be able to use the information in that specification to figure out who's interested in new facts, or is that bit of performance really enough that I need to go ahead and optimize and throw away those advantages. That's the choice.
And because this is gonna be used a lot of times, almost all records.
Mm-hmm.
Gonna have some mutable properties. To that we have to add the restore deletion pattern, which is gonna be used a lot of times. So the query is gonna get complicated.
Yeah, and that's what I would really love to be able to do, is to give people assistance in in building these complicated queries. And I think the way to do that is to build combinators. So if there's a common pattern, then give you a function that generates the code that you would use for that pattern. So so I should be able to...
You can just say, for example, mutable user and first name, last name, and that it generates the query itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that there are ways to get there. I'm starting from just here are all the tools, assemble them yourself, and then I know that that anything that you assemble with those tools will have the desirable properties that I want them to have. But then and then I can take a certain pattern of how to assemble those tools, like this query here, and then anytime that there's a type, let's go ahead and make that a type parameter of a function. Anytime there's access of a field, make that a lambda. Basically, you can just take this apart, generalize it, and turn that into a function, and then you give that function a name, and that name becomes a declaration. So I would give this function the name property, and now this becomes a declaration of a property, and it will compile down to the same thing, and it'll give you all the same advantages. But it's something that we can build on top as we build up layers. And ultimately, you should then be able to declare your model by just using these combinators. That's just a very functional approach to building an application, which is admittedly something that people are not used to doing for enterprise applications. They're used to defining their entities and properties using the type system, and then bringing in libraries to give them the different layers. So let's bring in entity framework, and now we can store those entities and properties into a database. Let's bring in mediator or automapper, and now we can take those entities and properties and we can turn them into API calls, and we can combine them that way. So it's a different way of solving the problem, but I think one that's that still has some precedent, because people have been doing that in functional programming all this time.
Now these are some complicated queries, but I think if you can really because the model is gonna be huge, but all the entities are nicely separated then in the source code.
Mm-hmm.
You go to the solution explorer, and you have dispatcher, you have supplier, and then all these different mutable properties are just part of that entity.
Yeah.
And it's gonna break down very nicely in different directories, and
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of repeating the same work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think so.
I think it will, to keep an overview is not going to be difficult. I'm only wondering, the moment that you change something to the model, for example, that worker, where you say, okay, now I'm going to have a worker which points to a user, and that user or a user array, and so we can have multiple users for worker.
Mm-hmm.
That means that all your queries will adapt.
Yeah.
And that might have an explosion of modifications.
Yeah, that is true. And that's yet another one of those places where this basically just brings that to the surface. That was already a problem. If you change the the structure of your data, you already have to create a migration from one version of the structure to another. And the thing is that it forces you to solve those problems right up front. The kind of the hidden problem with the migration is that you've got the assumption that you're going to apply the migration in one place at one time, and you'll be able to say this is before and this is after. And if you have a centralized database, then that assumption might actually be true. But if you've got any other kind of topology, then you have to think about, how am I going to shut down parts of my system and upgrade parts of them, and then bring them back up so that we only have version 1 talking to version 1 and version 2 talking to version 2. So yeah, I just force you to think through those problems right up front. So yeah, it certainly doesn't make things easier. It just makes the problems more visible.
But by thinking now about the real application and starting to do some tests, it's only then that I encounter all these things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that should be that is normal stuff that we did so long already, and how do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
But okay, we got another step further now. I think I should now expand these unit tests, write specification, really take over the screens that I have already in the existing application and build them up using the unit tests.
Yep.
And I will see whether I can start some testing with Visual Studio 2022 with a preview.
Excellent. Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay.
Really interested to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah, every time there is something interesting, we find out.
Mm-hmm.
The patterns from last week, where we walked through the restaurant.
Yes.
Yeah, you went out the week.
Yeah, I was in Vegas from Wednesday up until yesterday. So, but yeah, before going out to Vegas, I did take a look at the at those notebooks, and I think the notebook that describes the restaurant is a really good progression through the problem, and talks about why why you're making those particular decisions, and what and so that's exactly, I think, the kind of documentation that people can see that this is a small but useful example, and then be able to apply the same things to their own problems.
Perhaps I can do the same thing with what we did today. How to make this this mutable property combination.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see whether I can make an example in Notebook.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I will forget Notebook very fast.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Yeah, and then perhaps in the end we can put all these things, integrate them in Semantic.
Yes, yeah, I like that.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you so much, Jan.
Next week, you will be there?
Yes. And so next week, I'm hoping that I'll be able to either make some progress on error messages and giving some guidance in that respect, or I forget what let's say that I'll focus on the error messages. I forget what the other path was, but I think that was a longer path. So
you didn't merge the watch or the I think it was the multi-step watch into the main branch yet.
Right. Yes. Yeah, and I think that's because there are still, at the very least, some additional tests that I want to write. But But yeah, I think that's close, but not quite ready to merge. So that might be what I work on next.
Oh, I still have stuff enough to
Mhm.
to be busy. Okay, see you next week, and then we are in same hour UTC, I guess. Here we will be in winter time then.
Ooh, that is a good question. Because if I yeah, so it's still the same hour UTC. Yeah, it's still showing up as 7:30 a.m. on mine, and yeah, it would be the week after that it would change to 6:30 a.m. So now I have to think about, do I want to hold steady on UTC, or do I want to actually sleep?
If it's better for you to change an hour, go ahead. For me, it doesn't matter.
All right. Yep. So
I have to wait an hour longer or to an hour earlier. It's no
slave
problem.
to daylight saving for one more year. Darn it.
Yeah, that's what they say a long time already, and every year they postpone it. Yeah, we will see how it goes.
Yeah.
I think they wait for Corona to go away before they will solve the daylight problem.
Yeah, but yeah, if the world actually does go virtual and doesn't revert back, then maybe we can have the time zone conversation. And people would say, well, I don't care about my local time zone anymore. I care about the people that I'm talking to. And then everything becomes UTC and everybody's happy.
That would be practical. That would be practical. Okay. By the way, Discord didn't break up today.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. We've been going
That's progress.
Indeed.
That's progress. Okay, Michael. See you next week then.
Yes, indeed.
Bye-bye.
See you then.